Okay, thanks, Lou. Let me say a few introductory remarks, and then Lou, if you could share your screen so that I could put my slides up.
Yeah, you can do that at any point now.
Okay, great. First of all, before I turn to my slides, I just want to acknowledge everybody for joining this call. My name's Alan Hershkowitz. I'm an environmental scientist. I've been getting paid to do environmental research since 1978. I've been doing environmental science, industrial ecology for many decades. The best planned, I got involved with professional sports as an advisor, first to the Philadelphia Eagles football team, and then to Major League Baseball and the NBA and the National Hockey League. Now that and by the way, really the premise of this conversation, ultimately the objective of our work is not to measure greenhouse gases or to reduce energy per se. The objective of our work is to help alleviate human suffering and basically to help alleviate the suffering of the children of all species. So I want to acknowledge all of you. I send out, blessings to all of you. If you are on this call, then you have humanitarian intentions. Then you have, work is about money and meaning, and you're looking to add more meaning to your life. And I just want to acknowledge you for that because not everybody is a humanitarian thinking about how to help alleviate human suffering. But doing that is very, very complicated because the science tells us one thing, and the market and our culture are moving in another direction. So what I want to do is I've just now that Eco Athletes is expanding, and bravo to my brother Lou for. I remember when I first met him, I had given a speech at the New York Better Business Bureau. This is maybe 15 years ago, and Lou said, "I want to get involved with what you do," and I said, "I don't know," but anyway, one thing led to another, and Lou has really carved out an influential and visible space and a platform that has empowered people like you. You're using your visibility for humanitarian intentions. This presentation is designed to give you some history about the movement that you're part of. I'm going to let's go through that very quickly. And then I want to give you some fundamentals that you already know. If you come away from this with one new fact, one new insight, then I feel I've accomplished my goal. I know that you all are very informed about many things. So I'm trying to harmonize our understanding, harmonize our language. I'm going to be talking to you also about terminology that we can use and that we shouldn't use. We don't want to overstate accomplishments. We don't want to, that's a form of climate denial, basically assuming that we could do things quicker and easier than they take is a way of denying the complexities that we're dealing with. So let me get into my slides, and I'm going to speak for about 25 minutes, and um, and then we'll take questions. Okay, so I'm going to go through this in 2 minutes. You know all this. Basically, you know all North American professional sports leagues have sustainability programs, and they've had them for a long time. The NFL back in 1994 did the first environmental initiative using an event, the Super Bowl, for recycling. It was not a sustainability program more broadly, but it was really the first on purpose environmental initiative that took place by a North American professional sports team, sports league. And Jack and Susan Grove, I don't know if you know Jack and Susan, who have been working with the NFL for years, ran that. In the International Olympic Committee back in 1999, put together its Agenda 21, and that was the first time that the Olympics, in terms of connected sustainable development with sport. Uh, um, in 2005, Major League Baseball, I actually joined with Commissioner Seelig, and we created the Commissioner's Initiative on Sustainable Ballpark Operations. That was the first professional sports league comprehensive sustainability program development in North America. And the objective was to measure greenhouse gases and energy use and other key performance indicators of baseball stadiums. We're still working on that. Okay, I mean, when I said to Bud Selig, the commissioner, let's take the next 5 years to get these data. He said, "Oh, we could do it quicker than that." Well, we're still working on it. The IOC in 2007 enhanced its Agenda 21 and became much more explicit and ambitious with regards to sustainable development when it came out with the Guide for Sports, Environment, and Sustainable Development back in 2007. The NBA Green, once at Major League Baseball announced, David Stern got a hold of me and we created NBA Green. I still advise NBA Green. At the time that NBA Green was formed in 2007, the NBA shared 9 arenas with the National Hockey League. So I was contacted by Commissioner Gary Bettman and said, okay, you're doing with the NBA, let's do it with the National Hockey League. So we created NHL Green. All of these programs still exist. So what you are involved with as an eco advocate, eco athlete ambassador is a movement that you're helping to give visibility and force to. The USTA 2008 actually came into my office in 2007. There was a note on my desk saying, Alan, Billie Jean King would like to talk to you. Please call Pam at this number. I called Pam and Billie got on and said that they had just named the National Tennis Center after her, after me, Billie, and she knew what we were doing with baseball and basketball and hockey and asked if I would help create the program for the USTA. We did, and that led to programs at Wimbledon. It went to the programs at the French Open. It led to the program at the Australian Open. When we created the program for the USTA, one of my goals, my dreams, was that all the slams would have environmental programs, and they all do now. In 2007, in March of 2007, after many months of lobbying the editors of Sports Illustrated. We got a cover story on climate, March of 2007. Look at the bottom line, time to pay attention. As you're going to see, emissions have continued to worsen, have continued to go up. They are still continuing to go up. So this story came out 15 years ago, 2007, and you know, Major League Soccer started its program in 2009 with Don Garber. They still have that program going on right now. Every organization has to do something. NASCAR, obviously it's a fossil fuel based motor car organization, but even NASCAR can do things, and they do have uh, a greening program. I actually was invited to the announcement of NASCAR Green with Al Gore and General Wesley Clark and the chairman of NASCAR, and there was a lot of interest. Obviously, if NASCAR, acknowledges that climate is an issue, yeah, it's meaningful. I don't need to tell you all this. This is basically every college throughout North America, more or less, has a sustainability program. Back in 2018, okay, at the Conference of Parties, the United Nations climate negotiations, which happen every year. This one, in 2018, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, created the Sport for Climate Action Framework, which basically works to mobilize sports organizations throughout the world to advance the objectives of the Paris Agreement. The Yankees were the first professional North American team to join the UN Sport for Climate Action Framework. And there's they believe it or not. I mean, when I first started doing environmental work, if we got an article in a newspaper once every 6 months about environmental issues, we were thrilled. Here we are right now, on an on-field pre-game ceremony at Yankee Stadium talking about climate. The second person from the left is Satya Tripathi. He, at the time, was the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. So we had the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. On the left is Doug Behar, the Senior Vice President of Ballpark Operations for the Yankees. Aaron Boone, of course, the manager of the Yankees, and myself. And then after the Yankees, NBA in 2019 became the first professional sports league to join the Sport for Climate Action Framework. The objectives of the Sport for Climate Action Framework is to advance, and I will give you more specifics shortly, the objectives of the Paris Agreement, but also to promote education, use the platform of sports for climate education, climate literacy, and also to engage in continuous improvement and continue to advocate for climate action with your suppliers. Why are they doing this? Science is not just another opinion. Okay, basically, if you respect science, you will suffer less. If you don't respect science, you will suffer more. And by the way, to the point I made at the beginning of this conversation about, all of us trying to help alleviate human suffering through this effort, if you are authentically committed to this work, if alleviating suffering, you're going to suffer. There's a lot of sadness. Frankly, there may, it's fair to say there may be even more sorrow than joy in the world. And a lot of it is things that we're trying to address: poverty, hunger, good health, gender equality, racial equality, ending misogyny, ending homophobia. Um, all of those are features of a sustainable community. And what's fundamental is science. And also from a business perspective, this was in the Harvard Business Review, actually about 5 years ago. So the business case of sustainability, and of course, that's how you get this advanced. Um, we're not going, philanthropy is critical, but sustainability has gone from a good to have to a must have. It's gone from the right thing to do to being an essential corporate business management obligation. Investors are asking about this. The media is asking about this. Fans are asking about this. And here's the Harvard Business Review, and I'll just quote the first and the last sentences. Corporate boards of directors must tackle questions about sustainability in a new and urgent manner. If they don't, they will hear from investors about their lack of action. In the last sentence, in order to fulfill their obligations, every listed company board must now become sustainability fluent. Okay, this conversation we're having now is, contributing to your comprehension of how to say certain things with all due respect, that I think
that I think.
can be somehow I'm getting an echo.
Or think your iPhone may have connected to your computer.
Okay, well, let me stop that. Okay, all right. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you know about this, of course, sustainability is, ESG, environment and economics and social and governance. You know that they're all interdependent. We can't really address climate change. We can't address climate change effectively unless we also deal with gender inequality. More than half the food in the world is grown by women farmers, small scale women farmers. They don't get the economic or the political or the technical support that agribusiness gets, but they grow most of the food in the world. So if we want to deal with agricultural, ecological features related to agriculture, we need to support these women farmers that prevail in terms of food production globally. So everything is connected. And if there's one thing I want you to come away with today, and you already know this intuitively, you've experienced it, but it's important for us to be frank about this situation. The ruthlessness of the market does not go away because you have good intentions. Okay, we have to figure out how to outcompete um, the bad stuff. Um, I actually once went to, the CFO of, a major professional sports organization, federation, and asked for 1 penny from the tickets to create a climate fund. And I was turned down. I was told that those pennies add up, and I could not get 1 penny donated. And there have been situations where I have asked for financial support for a humanitarian or a sustainability initiative of less than 1 penny, 1 US penny, per item, and been turned down. Okay, so basically, you need to remember that, folks want to know what value you're going to add to their business. What value are you going to add to their brand? Okay, your humanitarian intentions and your desire to make things better are noble, and that's the star you need to navigate by. But to implement, you need to align with and understand the business strategy of the organizations you're trying to change. Okay, and then basically just a quick primer on the situation we're dealing with. This is something that you're probably all familiar with. If you're not, well, here it is. And basically, it just sort of helps explain the situation we're in, why we're in the situation we are. And actually, I'm trying to get my timer to work. Oh, it is working. Okay, great. So environmental impact is population times consumption times technology. You're probably familiar with this. Population is going up over 200,000, about 225,000 people a day, new people a day, 225,000 new people a day on the planet. Every 6 weeks, that's another New York City's worth of population. So population is going up. In some cases, it's going up slower, but it's still going up. Consumption, of course, consumption is going up. Our whole economy is oriented towards promoting consumption, personal consumption and government consumption. In some cases, in some decades, they go up by double digits. So, without consumption, that's when people panic. So population's going up and consumption's going up. And technology is still wedded overwhelmingly to environmentally ignorant processes. We're still overwhelmingly reliant on environmentally harmful technologies, especially those that are dependent on fossil fuels. So this is the situation we're at. Population's going up, consumption's going up, and the driver of consumption, the determinant of whether consumption is more or less sustainable, is technology, and technology has that we're relying on is still environmentally, frankly, ignorant. And this causes impacts. When you have worsening environmental situation through more consumption, bad consumption, and more population, and continued reliance on fossil fuels, you're going to cause impacts. For example, like right now, you should all know, and I suspect you all do, that we are in what is being called the sixth mass extinction, the sixth mass species extinction. Unlike the previous five mass extinctions beforehand, which were caused by natural disasters like asteroids, this sixth extinction is being driven by human activities, by disrupting habitat, by basically we're seeing disruptions at anywhere, species extinctions at rates of over 100 times what should be happening through natural species loss. In fact, the sports greening movement started by trying to protect this part of the southeast United States, which is the Appalachian mixed mesophytic forests, which is the most biologically diverse temperate forest in the world. I started my work protecting those forests from being cut down to make toilet paper. The Philadelphia Eagles football team asked me to come in 2004. They had already built Lincoln Financial Field, and they asked me to basically help them make their stadium more environmentally responsible. But it was already a new stadium. But the short story is that they were buying their bathroom tissue, their toilet paper, from a paper mill that was cutting down eagle habitat. So this is the Philadelphia Eagles buying toilet paper from a paper mill that was cutting down eagle habitat on an area called the Cumberland Plateau, a most biologically rich area. So when I informed the owners of the Eagles, Jeffrey and Christina Lurie, that people were going to wipe their ass with eagle habitat at the stadium, and if Greenpeace got a hold of that, they would have an anti-branding campaign they didn't want to deal with. They were both environmentalists, and they changed their paper. And this, again, is another way to describe, this is, species, imperiled species hotspots. And you could see that the Southeast United States, which has, again, the most temperate, biologically diverse temperate forests in the world, and it's also the wood breadbasket of the world. So when you're buying paper, when you're buying wood products, you want to make sure they are certified by the Forest Stewardship Council. By the way, everybody can get these slides, so don't panic about there being too many. I'm going to be going on for just a little less than 10 minutes, and then we'll go to questions. But to the point of environmental impact equaling population times consumption times technology, just remember that still to this day, 84% of the energy consumed in the world and 82% of the energy consumed in the US still comes from fossil fuels. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which again, they issue their assessment reports periodically. In April of 2022, they issued their sixth assessment report. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's climate work is a tribute to humanity. I mean, it's an amazing thing. Literally, more than 1,000 scientists from over 120, 130 countries, biologists, chemists, physicists, geologists, anthropologists, economists come together to basically assess collectively the state of our climate. It's really the most collaborative and comprehensive and diverse scientific collaboration in human history. And what they have concluded is that without immediate and deep emission reductions across all sectors, limiting, the emission of greenhouse gases, we're not going to be able to achieve the 1.5 degree limit in the Paris Agreement. And in fact, emissions are still going up. And this is important for you to understand, really critical for you to understand, because there's a lot of good things happening. But overall, okay, fossil fuel emissions are still increasing. And between 2023 and 2024, they went up almost 1%. Okay, they are going up. In 2024, the Earth's average temperature exceeded a 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level increase for the first time in history. Okay, that is the lower limit of the Paris Agreement, which we were supposed to basically not achieve. According to the Paris Agreement, we're already at it. At the upper limit of the Paris Agreement is 2 degrees Celsius. Scale on making these adjustments on reducing greenhouse gases would be difficult if everybody was, working in good faith. And I don't need to tell you folks on this call that not everyone is working in good faith. And right now, it is impossible to meet, basically, with emissions still going up and the time frames, narrowing. That it is basically for us to meet the UNFCCC goal, science-based goal, to cut emissions in half by 2030 from a 2019 baseline, or to achieve net zero by 2040. We're just not going to be able to do that. Emissions for steel are still going up. Emissions for cement production is still going up. Emissions for agricultural production is still going up. Emissions for transportation are still going up. Emissions for plastics production are still going up. They're going up in some cases slower, but they're going up. Okay, and our goal is to cut them. All right, let's get into if you're going to guide an organization, guide, your team, your venue, your business, your life, how do you do it? Let's get a little bit more granular into sustainability planning. I'm not going to get into, a very long discussion of sustainability planning. You might want to join Bob Willard has a data sustainability online boutique called Sustainability Advantage. Marsha Willard wrote a book called Sustainability Planning. Bob Willard runs Sustainability Advantage. It's a very good source of keeping current with sustainability planning practices. But I'm going to give you just a couple of things here right now. So basically, the number one reason sustainability succeeds is support from leadership. An organization is the shadow of its leadership, and support from leadership is essential. Leadership support, employee engagement, internal communication is arguably the most difficult thing to do. Certainly in my world, it is. The number of divisions that I have to deal with, my colleagues and I, for example, the NBA are dealing with more than 24 different divisions globally. We're coordinating on language, on operations, on, relations with sponsors and vendors and legal. It's very complicated internal communication. But if you have support from leadership, the resources will be allocated to make things happen. If you don't have the leadership, the reason sustainability programs fail is a lack of commitment from leadership, a lack of resources, competing priorities, not viewing sustainability as a priority, cultural change challenges. I mean, basically, there are economic barriers to sustainability, technical barriers, and cultural barriers. The most difficult to change is culture. If you instigate a cultural shift, the most important thing we could do is instigate a cultural shift in how people's attitudes about how we relate to the planet, how we relate to the ecosystems that give us water to drink. Every water body in the United States and North America, is contaminated with mercury. How do we treat the atmosphere that gives us air to breathe? We're pumping over 120 million tons of global warming pollution into the atmosphere every day. And every day we pump a little bit more because the number's still going up. Okay. So really, if we change our culture and the way President Kennedy did and said, we're going to put a person on the moon in 10 years. There was no technology to do that, but he instigated a cultural shift, and that led to government releasing resources, financial resources, which led to technical innovation and then to ultimately, success. So, um, for sustainability planning, you need to create a vision, and sit down with the leadership of the organization, get leadership approval and endorsement, and articulate ESG, the business, the social, and the ecological vision, the rationale behind the vision. In terms of your planning, with regards to the greenhouse gas reduction goal, this is the Paris Agreement. This is eco athletes' aspirations. This is the aspirations of the New York Yankees. This is the aspiration of the NBA. This is the aspirations of, the IOC. This is the aspirations of eco athletes. And when I say aspiration, it used to be a commitment. Okay, that to join the Sport for Climate Action framework, you had to commit to achieving a 50% reduction and commit to 2040. But it became clear that scope 3 emissions, the majority of the emissions that we have to deal with and manage, were going up, and we were not going to be able to achieve that pledge. So you don't want to ask the Yankees or the NBA or the Olympics to make a pledge that they know they can't achieve. So we switched it to an aspiration. We aspire to a 20, 30, 50% reduction. We aspire to net zero by 2040. But right now, with emissions going up in scope 3 for so many other items that we rely on, goods and services, we can't necessarily achieve them. I'm going to just go through this. I want to just take 2 more minutes. I'm going to try to wrap up because I've been going on now for 20 minutes, and I want to keep it to 25. So basically, I just want to remind you about be careful with how you represent your accomplishments. Or describe your activities. You got to, avoid superlatives. So, for example, instead of saying this is a sustainable event or this is a sustainable product, you could say things are more sustainable, because sustainability is a composite of many different features, and this. Okay, the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goal number 1 is no poverty. Number 2 is no hunger. Number 3 is good health. Number 5 is gender equality. Number 13 is climate action. So if you're saying we're sustainable, well, that means that you've somehow, factored in consideration of all these different sustainable development goal features, and that you feel confident that you advance them. No, that's not. So you could do some of this. Okay. When I do work with different organizations, I list which sustainable development goal the initiative is advancing, because initiatives don't all advance equally. So instead of saying carbon neutral, that you are carbon neutral, say you aspire to become carbon neutral. By the way, if you say you've already achieved carbon neutral, then there's nothing for you to ask from your suppliers or your relationships. If you've already achieved carbon neutral, well, then you're there. But if you're aspiring to it, then you could ask others to contribute and help you. Now, this is a life cycle inventory chart. This is a chart that comes from one of the books I wrote. But actually, I modified it. This is a life cycle inventory, an LCI, not an LCA, not a life cycle assessment. A life cycle assessment is an LCI with an assessment attached to it on how to reduce the impacts identified in an LCI. So an LCA, a life cycle assessment, has an assessment on how to reduce the impacts that an LCI documents. If you're saying you're carbon neutral, every one of these lines is an emission category. Okay. This is for a plastic straw. I spent months changing the straws at the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Okay. From a petroleum-based straw to a straw made from the fermentation of canola oil. Okay. And we didn't say it was a sustainable straw, but we could say it was more sustainable. And just to give you an idea, if you want to say you're carbon neutral, you're going to or net zero, you're going to basically say that every one of these lines, every one of these emission categories is at carbon neutrality or net zero. You just can't do it. And so saying net zero or carbon neutral, we aspire to it. Compostable, if you're claiming something is compostable, it needs to be able to be composted where people use it and dispose of it. If it's not, then it's not compostable. Biodegradability, I'm not going to get too much into this. It's a kind of a weird term because, if a marine mammal is entangled in plastics, it's good that the material will biodegrade in a number of weeks or months. But biodegradability, really materials should not be leaked into the environment to begin with. And biodegradability could, really imply that it's okay for them, to leak into the environment because they're going to biodegrade. I'm not going to go into this next stage. I'm going to actually wrap it up because these projections of where we are right now, we've already achieved 1.7 degrees, and what's going on in the world in terms of fires and droughts and effects on women and children and the elderly and and people of color. I'm not going to get into it because you can go to 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, and I do want to remind you that when you measure, you got to focus on scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 1 is what's happening at your site, what you own, the cars you own, the building emissions that you generate. Scope 2 is coming from your utility. Are you using coal, oil, natural gas, or are you using wind, solar, hydro, or nuclear? Scope 3 is everything else, and that's where 80 to 90% of your emissions are going to be. And the challenge is to reduce by 50% from a 2019 baseline, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% from a 2019 baseline, and aspire to achieve net zero by 2040. The way to do it is to measure, reduce, and replace petroleum-based fuels and products. Just to leave you with a quote from the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres: we're sleepwalking into a climate catastrophe. No country or corporation can insulate itself from these levels of chaos. Climate activists are sometimes depicted as dangerous radicals, but the truly dangerous radicals are the countries that are increasing the production of fossil fuels. Now is the time to stop burning up our planet and start investing in abundant renewable energy. And I couldn't have said it any better. So thank you very much. And now I'm going to stop sharing. And I am back. So that was 27 minutes. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much, Alan. And appreciate the thoroughness, even though you went through it quickly, the thoroughness of kind of the taking us through the history of the green sports movement and where the world is at, the scoreboard, to use a sports metaphor. And we're, the athletes here they have the mentality of, okay, we are in need of a climate comeback. How do we start to do it?
Look, let me just remind you, I like to, outside the family, the most influential role models are athletes and entertainers in that order. Okay. So, our colleagues on this call today have a platform of visibility. And even if you're not, Michael Jordan or, Carlos Alcaraz, you have, being an athlete implies discipline, it implies intelligence, it implies awareness and accomplishment. Being an athlete, a division, whatever, collegiate athlete or a professional athlete or an Olympian, imbues someone with a credibility. And that's why it's so important for everybody to be able to be authentic. The eco athletes is about authenticity. If we're not authentic, then we are engaging in climate denial. And look, this stuff takes time, and I've been working on this issue for more than 40 years. And all I can tell you is, the atmosphere is worse, the forests are worse, the oceans are worse. But when I get before my maker and she asks me, she's not going to ask me if I solved global warming, but she'll ask me how I spent my time. And I could say I tried. Okay. So what I'd like to do is get to questions that people have.
Yes. Let's
And,
get to the questions.
yeah.
I'm going to take a point of personal privilege and ask the first one, and then everybody else can either raise your hand physically if I can see you or do the hand raise icon. My first question, Alan, is in light of the passing of Robert Redford a couple days ago, if you could share his role in the green sports movement.
Okay. So I was a senior scientist at a very, prominent and important environmental organization that had people on the board, some Wall Street titans, but also Leo DiCaprio and James Taylor and Robert Redford and, the CEO of Disney and whatnot. And after George Bush the second got reelected in 2004, you may not know, but back then, George Bush the second and his vice president, Dick Cheney, were doing at a small scale what Trump is doing now, but they were basically very pro-coal. They were trying to deny climate science. They were trying to convince the American public that climate science was more hypothetical than it was, in fact, scientifically consensus. So there was a meeting, Robert Redford, who is a well-known actor, some folks know him, a lot of folks don't know him, believe it or not. I introduced him to people who were, in their young 20s that didn't know who he was, but he's one of the most famous actors in Hollywood history, and he just died. So he convened a meeting. He was a trustee of the NRDC, Natural Resources Defense Council, where I was senior scientist. And he convened a meeting at his home in Sundance to talk about how NRDC could respond to the bully pulpit of the White House, which was trying to cast doubt on climate science. And Bob Redford said, sports. We need to engage with sports. We need to engage with the NFL. We need to engage with baseball. We need to engage with basketball. The year previous, just serendipitously, I was contacted by the owners of the Philadelphia Eagle football team because I do industrial ecology, and one of their consultants, who was the former sanitation commissioner in New York City, who I knew, said, if you want to run your stadium in an environmentally better way, why don't you talk to Alan? So I got contacted by the owners of the Philadelphia Eagles football team, and that's when the famous toilet paper story happened, where, I discovered that the Eagle Stadium was going to use toilet paper from eagle habitat, and we changed that. I thought that was a one-off. But when Bob Redford, a year later, said, okay, we need to engage with sports in order to counter the bully pulpit of the White House, I said, hey, I did this thing with the Eagles. So Redford said, let's start a sports project. So Bob Redford and I started a sports project at NRDC. And also at that meeting at Redford's house was another NRDC trustee, Bob Fisher, who owned the Oakland Athletics baseball team. And he was part of the conversation I was having with Redford. And he said, Alan, if you write a letter to the commissioner of baseball, I'll get it to him. So I wrote a letter to Bud Selig, and I talked about building on the good environment. I'd like to build on the good environmental work baseball was doing. I had absolutely no idea what environmental work baseball was doing, but I figured somebody is recycling one can somewhere. And I did not want to write the commissioner of baseball a letter saying, I'd like to meet with you to help you reduce your damaging impacts. That's not the way to introduce the issue. I wanted to build on the good work you were doing. Turns out the commissioner of baseball at the time, Bud Selig, was a great environmentalist. He took me by the shoulders and said, whatever you need, you let me know. When he retired from being commissioner, I wrote an article in Sports Business Journal titled The Greatest Environmentalist in the History of Sports about Bud Selig, the commissioner of baseball. Bud Selig introduced me to David Stern. David Stern introduced me to Gary Bettman. So that was, MLB, NBA, NHL, and all this started with Bob Redford's credibility, because we did a video with Bob Redford, actually, who acted in a movie called The Natural, and we did a video of him talking about the commissioner's initiative on baseball operations. That's a long-winded answer, so let's get to others' questions. You're on mute.
I'm going to ask one on behalf of one of our champions, Jackie Pieri, who I believe is working out. So she asks to ask you, what message you think is the most important to get sports fans to change, personal change, politics, bringing a climate lens to their individual careers, and what have you found to be the most impactful or persuasive lever in the sports world?
Yeah, okay. Well, look, people focus on themselves, on their ego and their money, and people, so the question is, how do you add value to people's lives while advancing our mission? What research has shown that, environmental research has shown, for example, it varies by demographic. So, for example, focusing on the family, on the benefits to your children's health, on the fact that your children are going to, have healthier food, and they're going to have a more uh, less damaging weather, that they're going to, they'll have more resilient communities. So, focusing on the family matters, family health. Again, remember, climate change is a contributor and has been an accelerator of the spread of infectious diseases as well. When COVID came out, the loss of forests and other ecological areas contributed to spread of infectious diseases. So focusing on health and also on the economy, um, green jobs, reducing your costs. I mean, when I switch to an electric vehicle, I don't go to a gas station. So you can focus on costs. There is an ethical component as well. There's a scientific, component. I mean, Catherine Hayhoe, who's one of our, colleagues, she says, let's talk about it. The key thing is talk with people and see what resonates with them. What are they concerned about? Where are they getting their information? That's the key thing. Where do people get their information? It should, they need to get their information from credible sources. Science is not just another opinion.
Awesome. Oliver, you have your hand raised, and then Bell. Oliver first.
Yeah, thanks for this. It's really, really cool to listen to. My question is about what do you recommend organizations do when the travel associated with their teams is out of their control? Like if we're thinking of a national team traveling around the world circuit, where the travel is out of their control and it takes up 90+% of their emissions, very minimal, sometimes no scope one or two, because the organization of the team might not own its own venue or vehicles. What do you recommend the focus should be on there in terms of aspiring to reduce emissions by 50% or net zero?
Yeah, great question. Very important question. By the way, I work with the French Open, and 99% of the French Open's environmental impacts are scope three, and 99% of those are transportation. And the NBA this year established transportation as its priority strategic message to all venues about requesting improvement in operations. So you're absolutely right. Last year, the NBA reduced team travel by 44,000 miles. They did not do it for climate reasons. They did it because of player health. And by the way, good health is sustainable development goal number three. So, that effort is still a sustainability initiative. Um, um, but incidentally, while they reduced by $44,000 for player health, that also resulted in fewer aviation impacts. The Major League Baseball's uh, team travel actually, increased last year through their schedule adjustments. You're absolutely right. Civilization has its costs. We're out of when federations and leagues control the schedule, it's hard for any team to do anything about that. Although, in France, now you can't take a flight if you're a sports team that's, uh, longer than, shorter than 2 hours. You need to take a train. So maybe teams could take a train, but bear in mind that there's other things that could be done. So besides team schedule transportation, there's fan transportation, there's like for example, the NBA prioritizes when people use Lyft or Uber, they prioritize the electric vehicles in Lyft or Uber for their executives. At Yankee Stadium, they are installing EV chargers for their players. Um, Promotion of bike valets so that you don't necessarily have to have 200 bike or 100 or whatever bike parking stations at an event. You could have them set up temporarily as a valet service for that event, and for the 50 or 25 bicycles that show up, you'll be able to protect them and whatnot. So the point is, there's fan transport, there's executive transport, there's team and player transport that's separate from playing a game, and then of course the scheduling. Some things are harder, like scheduling and competition between cities. Some things are more of a available decarbonization opportunity, like encouraging public transit, like the USTA did, like the Yankees do, like the Red Sox do, like the White Sox do, and also encouraging walking and bicycling, and you know where you can reduce your aviation impacts, those are the biggest ones. But measure, you got to measure everything. Everything has to be measured. Whatever initiative you do, you got to measure.
Okay,
Bell,
perfect. Thank you.
yeah.
Bell, you're up.
And it's hard. By the way, Oliver, it's hard. It is hard. Okay. This is, it's hard and it takes a long time. Okay. By the way, I worked for over almost 3 years putting 3 bike sharing stations around Yankee Stadium, working with the New York City Department of Transportation. And when it came time to announce that, we had to change the announcement because the sponsor of New York City's bike sharing program, City Bike, is a different bank than the Yankees bank. So the Yankees couldn't put their logo next to City Bike. So they had to talk about bike sharing in a way that was respectful of their contract with Bank of America. These are nuances that affect our ability to implement smart transportation. If you're not working in the building, you don't know what's going on. I'm sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for talking to us today. I guess I just want to pick your brain about people who are entering the workforce or potentially looking to pivot their careers. How would you suggest going about the job search to work sort of in the screen sports space or even entertainment space?
Yeah, cool. So, right. So before the election in the US, there was a lot of funding. The Inflation Reduction Act put, hundreds of billions of dollars into state and local governments and federal agencies that were doing good things. So the job opportunities are in for-profit, not-profit, and government. So, the government funding prior to the election was very robust and it trickled down to many states. So you could work for, by the way, let me remind you that sustainability is more than just climate action. Okay. So I do mentoring. I help people, whoever asks, I help. And recently, one of your colleagues, someone from Yale was getting a master's degree from the divinity school. And he was also getting a master's degree from the forestry school at the same time. He contacts me because he wants to be the sustainability advisor to the Boston Red Sox. Okay. And I actually started the environmental program at the Red Sox. I was asked to throw out a first pitch at Fenway, put 28 solar panels on the right field roof of Fenway.
Did you throw a strike?
Yeah, I've been asked about 4 first pitches, and I played third base in high school, so I can get it over the plate. And the idea of not throwing it from the mound to me is like, no, you can't not throw it from the mound. Anyway, the point is that this gentleman was getting a degree from the Divinity School at Yale, He wanted to be a sustainability advisor. He was thinking of it in the context of climate. But if he thought about it from the context of poverty alleviation, which is Sustainable Development Goal #1, or hunger alleviation, if you come out of Yale with a degree from Divinity School, you're going to be able to work at a poverty alleviation organization. You're going to be able to work at a hunger alleviation organization or a gender equality, whatever. Work with that feature of sustainability and then form a partnership with the Red Sox or with, bring the question you have to ask is what value can you add? Now, the nonprofit world right now is getting more funding in response to all the damaging actions taking place, in Washington on the environment. But a lot of that increase in funding is going into lawyers, okay, to basically counter, the rollback in regulations. But there are some, organizations, local, or statewide environmental organizations, NGOs that you could look at, or international agencies like the United Nations, or whatever. Put your name on the list, put your name on the list of different international, the World Bank or the UN or, the UN Environment Program, the UNFCCC, the UNESCO. There's many ways to do humanitarian work. The key thing is that you have to have a personal ecology because as a humanitarian, you want to heal the planet and do good right now, and you want to get paid for it right now. And that blessings to you that, all I can say is it will happen because you have made, everyone on this call has made good decisions. That's why you're on this call. That's why you've achieved what you achieved. When you make good decisions, good things happen. There's no reason you're going to suddenly become stupid. And I'm talking to all of you, okay? You've done good things. You're going to continue to do good things. In fact, you're going to learn how to do good things even more effectively as time goes on. But it takes fucking time. And here's the thing. Give yourself a year or a year and a half. Okay, people don't like to hear this, but this is, if you take timing off the table, and you say, okay, I'm going to have my next gig in a year. If you don't have it in 2 or 3 or 4 months, you say, okay, I still have 5 or 6 months. But if you say I need my next gig in 3 months or 4 months, and you don't have it in 2 months, you're going to panic. And you should all be meditating at least a few minutes. You got to take a deep breath. This work is challenging. You want to do good stuff. You're eager. You want to make more money. You want to be more influential. That will happen. Trust yourself. Of course, there's always doubt. Doubt, Descartes didn't say, I think, therefore I am. He said, I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. Okay? And doubt leads to uncertainty. And uncertainty leads to stress. Okay. And doubt is impossible to avoid, and uncertainty is impossible to avoid. And so we're inclined towards stress. You need to train your mind. You need to do mind training like you all do as athletes, so that when the stressful thoughts come, you could say, hello, thanks for visiting me. Okay. But I'm going to move you aside because my reality right now is I am smart. I know how to make good decisions and I need to move forward. But you will feel suffering. You will experience challenging. I, to this day, still cry. Okay. I encounter circumstances. When I went to India recently and I, was there for a long time, I spent the first 4 days crying and calling my wife and saying everything I've worked at for 40 years is useless. Okay. And, and I've cried in my therapist's office. And that's when I learned that I work on non-resolvable issues. I will not resolve global warming in my lifetime. I will not address child hunger or child soldiers or misogyny or homophobia, but I am working on it. And, and that is meaningful. And I also managed to get paid doing that. Okay. And that's going to happen to all of you. Okay. It's going to happen. So when you have these doubts and uncertainty, you have to trust yourself, that you know how to make good decisions. You have a track record of making good decisions. And there are no, I love what Carlos Alcaraz just said. He said, I never lose a match. I either win or I learn a lesson. Okay. But I never lose. And that's the thing. Every challenge is a way for us to refine our work on the path. Our path is compassion. Our path is loving kindness. Our path is wisdom. Okay. We're on that path. And if you have a path with heart, it will strengthen you. If you have a path without heart, it will weaken you. The fact that all of you, it's no coincidence that athletes are rallying around a heartfelt humanitarian initiative, because that's what you're about. Okay. Athleticism and heart are synonymous. Okay. And now you're amplifying that to, humanitarian goals. You're diversifying, what you bring to your event, and you're going to succeed. And if you understand you're going to succeed, okay, collaboratively, it will be more sane for you to deal with the fucking crazy stuff that we're dealing with, because this is a very, very dark and challenging time. Okay. And, awareness is the first step towards healing. And I hope that some of the stuff information I gave you will empower you to be more effective communicators, to be more authentic activists. Okay. Don't despair, but if you must despair, and you will, work on. Don't despair, but if you must despair, work on. Okay. I saw that on a board in a church when I was in college 40 years ago, and it stuck with me. Okay. Perseverance. Okay. You're smart. You've made good decisions. You're in a good place. Just give yourself a little, say, okay, a year and a half, I will get there. And you know what? You'll get there sooner than that. That's the thing. That's the thing. You will get there sooner than that. But psychologically, if you give yourself that space, you'll be more comfortable in the search. And if you're more emotionally comfortable in the search, you'll make better decisions, and you'll progress quicker. I don't know why I had a triple espresso before this call, because it's early here in Montana. And so I am really, forgive me for going off. But anyway,
You have to, and Alan, you have to hop in about 7 minutes, right?
we got a call with the NBA in 7 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So let's have one or two, if time allows, question. Anybody else who wants to ask, just raise a hand.
And by the way, this is not the last time, if you're going to get the slides, Lou will distribute them. And if you need to reach out to me, just send me a note. I'm happy to help.
Anybody else with a question? I think Emmanuel has a question, and
yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it, Dr. Allen. This is really informative. I guess the question I have is you've been in the industry yourself for 40 years. And so I feel like, the stuff that were kind of like the low-hanging fruits that you probably started off with back, trying to get the NBA involved, the MLB, NFL, and all of them, some of those have already kind of been picked. And so now it's kind of, as you said, like the systematic changes. And I guess the question I have is for, younger people who are trying to be able to get in this industry. And this kind of might be a little bit of Bell's question as well, but for people that are actually in the industry and you start talking about doing the systematic changes, how do you get that to really make it happen? Because it doesn't seem like it's any more of like, hey, do this pilot project or do this. It's more so really getting them to do it, and even on the side of policy and getting that to happen, because all the things that are in the current framework right now have kind of started to be picked and done. So how do you get those things that you need to do to make that extra stretch of the mile, like knowing we won't do it all entirely, but how can you get them to make that extra push?
I love this question. Thank you so much. Because basically, I just want every job is a sustainability job. Okay. You can advance sustainability and humanitarian intentions as a poet, as a construction worker, as an accountant, as a lawyer, as a doctor, as an engineer. The key thing is for you to get in the building. You get in the building, then you can get in the apartment. You get in the apartment, then you could sit down for dinner. Okay. You got to get in the building. So whatever, you just, the people that I work with on sustainability, they're not people with sustainability. I don't have a degree. I taught at graduate, at Wharton, at Harvard, Yale on sustainability programs, but I don't have a degree in sustainability management. Okay. I have my work is in environmental science and other things. The people I work with are, operations people, at the venues, energy engineers. So, and marketing people, and financial people, and certainly operations people. So, whatever particular interest you have, advance it, and then take the mission of figuring out how to improve that sector, whatever it is. I work with Broadway theaters. I green the Oscars. I work with Royal Albert Hall. Whatever they're doing, everybody, could play a role in doing better. So the key thing is avoid toxic people, avoid unpleasant companions at all costs. Stay away from people that cause you stress or cause you grief, or that, are self-cherishing. Stay away from people who are too self-cherishing, okay? Service leadership, work with people that are generous, happy, humanitarian. And that, you're going to bump into idiots. We all do. They're unavoidable. We're humans, and we live in a degenerate time. So, there's a lot of that. But work with good people. Try to do good stuff. Doesn't matter what you're doing, okay? I work with folks who are working on transportation. I work with stuff who are working on theater production. I work with stuff who are selling, alternative plastics, investors. Everybody has a role to play. The key thing is, you need to have a sustainable life, a personal ecology, work with good people, do good stuff. Sometimes you have to do stuff for money. Sometimes you could do stuff that's more meaningful. Most of the stuff I do, I won't even take money for it if people paid me. Okay. The opportunity to speak with you folks today, I mean, it's a real blessing. So, some stuff you'll volunteer for, so wherever you are, you can be a healer. You could be a light, for whatever you're doing, and everything is necessary. Look at those sustainable development goals. Look at those 13 sustainable. Work in food, work in agriculture. I mean, food. My God, agriculture. Work with indigenous communities. Help alleviate, child hunger, help alleviate misogyny or homophobia or poverty. All of these things are really important. And and that's what's called climate justice and environmental justice. Everything is connected. You
Well,
are advocates for social justice, for climate justice, for environmental justice. You're the leadership that, I mean, look, most people don't think about this stuff. The fact that you're on this call thinking about it, trust me, most people are not figuring out how to be better humanitarians and how to, merge their career with, humanitarian missions. Folks are really focused on, like, survival and making money and, protecting themselves. It's tough. And that you're willing to actually use your platform to do more than just make a buck. That's, bravo.
well, perfect. I think that's a perfect way to end this very important conversation. And great questions from the champions. We have a lot on our plate, individually and as a collective. And I think Alan's kind of guidance here will help us in a number of levels. So I want to thank Alan for this conversation and the one last week. I know you have to go talk to the NBA, so go. Let's go NBA, and thank you all for attending.
And we're counting on you. Okay. I mean, we need you all to succeed. The world needs you to succeed. The world needs you to be doing what you're doing. And, just and bring some more along with you, Uh,
Amen.
thank you for the opportunity to speak with all of
Thank
you. Blessings to all of you, infinite blessings to all of you. And thanks again. It was really a joy to be able to speak with you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Alan, so much.
Thank you.
And
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank
we'll,
you.
Thank you.
we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. And all right.
End recording.
Oh yeah.